Before that fateful day in November of 2006, the story of Ken Peters and Kasatka was on the surface a classic tale of human-animal partnership. It was the kind of relationship SeaWorld promoted, the kind that drew crowds and inspired awe. It was, seemingly, the perfect partnership built on trust and respect, painstakingly cultivated over years of dedicated training and shared performances. Ken Peters, a seasoned animal trainer, wasn't just thrown into the water with Kasatka and told to make it work. His journey was a gradual progression, a careful dance of learning and adaptation. He began with smaller marine mammals, mastering the art of communication, observation, and positive reinforcement. He studied animal behavior, learning to read subtle cues and anticipate reactions. It was a career, yes, but for Ken, it was also a calling, a passion for connecting with these incredible creatures. And when the opportunity arose to work with orcas, he jumped at it. The sheer intelligence and power of these animals were captivating, but he knew that working with them required a different level of commitment, a deeper understanding of their individual personalities and needs. Kasatka, a dominant orca, demanded respect. She wasn't a creature to be bossed around. She was powerful. She was smart. She was an apex predator. So Ken dedicated himself to understanding her, learning her quirks, and building a relationship based on mutual trust. This wasn't about domination. It was about cooperation. Their training sessions were meticulously planned and executed. Every interaction, every command, every reward was carefully considered. They started with basic behaviors, reinforcing each. Success with positive feedback, a rub-down, a fish, verbal praise. Slowly, they built upon these foundations, adding complexity and nuance to their routines. Hours were spent in the water, not just performing for crowds, but building rapport. Feeding sessions became opportunities for connection. Ken would offer her fish, speaking softly, making eye contact, reinforcing the bond between them. He learned her preferences, the way she liked to be touched, the sounds that soothed her. The pair was always on display. Audiences would clap as she effortlessly lifted him on her rostrum. They marveled at the synchronicity as they glided through the water, a symphony of human and animal movement. This display was the result of countless hours of preparation, trust, and mutual understanding. But it wasn't all showmanship. A huge portion of Ken's work was behind the scenes, away from the cheering crowds and flashing cameras. He was involved in her daily care, monitoring her health and ensuring her well-being. He learned to recognize the subtle signs of stress or discomfort, allowing him to address potential problems before they escalated. And perhaps, most importantly, Ken spent time simply observing Kasatka, learning her social dynamics within the pod, understanding her individual personality. He knew when she was playful, when she was serious, when she needed space. It was this intimate knowledge that allowed him to anticipate her behavior and adapt his approach accordingly. SeaWorld, of course, benefited greatly from this bond. The image of a trainer confidently swimming alongside a killer whale, performing intricate routines with apparent ease, was a powerful marketing tool. It reinforced the narrative that these animals were happy and thriving in captivity, that they enjoyed interacting with humans, that SeaWorld was a place of respect and conservation. And for a long time, it seemed that this narrative held true. Ken and Kasatka were a symbol of this harmonious relationship, a testament to the power of trust and training. Their performances were seamless, their interactions affectionate. They had been together for years. working in tandem and forming a seemingly unbreakable bond. Ken trusted Kasataka, and Kasataka, for all appearances, trusted Ken. They had built a rapport and formed a partnership that defied conventional expectations. The pair were a showstopper, and for many, they were the main reason they attended. The bond between them was evident in their actions, smiles, and interaction. It was thought to be genuine and a match made in heaven. Ken Peters was an experienced and renowned trainer, and Kasataka was a star performer. They were a team that complemented one another, and their shows were an obvious exhibition of this. It was always a perfect performance, a showstopper, and a wonderful example of synergy between animal and man. But beneath the surface, unseen by the adoring crowds, unspoken in the carefully crafted marketing materials, a different story was brewing. A story of a wild animal in captivity, a story of suppressed instincts, a story of a relationship built on control and confinement. And on that fateful day in November, that story would come crashing to the surface, shattering the illusion of the perfect partnership forever. November 29th, 2006. The day started like any other show day at SeaWorld San Diego. The sun was shining, the crowds were buzzing with anticipation, and the star of the show, Kasataka, was ready to perform. Or so it seemed. The Believe show was a spectacle, a carefully choreographed dance between trainers and orcas, designed to inspire awe and wonder. But beneath the surface of dazzling displays and soaring leaps, something was brewing, something that would shatter the illusion of perfect harmony forever. The music swelled, the lights dimmed, and the audience roared as Ken Peters, a seasoned trainer with years of experience, stepped into the familiar embrace of the Shamu Stadium. He knew Kasataka, or so he thought. They had performed together countless times, building a bond of trust and mutual respect. Or at least, that's what the audience believed. As Ken approached the edge of the pool, Kasataka emerged from the depths, her massive frame dwarfing him in comparison. She was magnificent, a powerful apex predator capable of awe-inspiring feats, but also, as the events of that day would reveal, a creature driven by instincts that no amount of training could fully tame. The show began flawlessly. Ken and Kasataka moved in sync, a seamless blend of human and animal athleticism. They surfed across the water, leaped in unison, and executed a series of intricate maneuvers that drew gasps and cheers from the crowd. For a brief moment, it was as if they were one, a perfect partnership forged in the heart of the sea. But the illusion was fragile. As Ken stood on the platform, waiting for the next cue, a subtle shift occurred, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye. Kasataka hesitated, her movements becoming less fluid, her attention wavering. Her calf, Kalia, was nearby in a connecting pool. Kalia was young, vulnerable, and her presence seemed to ignite something within Kasataka, a primal protectiveness. That trumped all the training, all the years of conditioning. Then, in an instant, everything changed. Without warning, Kasataka turned on Ken, clamping her powerful jaws around his left foot. The crowd gasped as he was dragged underwater, the vibrant music replaced by stunned silence. What had been a scene of joy and wonder transformed into a terrifying spectacle of predator and prey. For the next 10 minutes, Ken Peters was held captive beneath the surface, a prisoner in the jaws of a killer whale. He was dragged deeper and deeper, the pressure building in his ears, his lungs screaming for air. Each time he managed to surface for a fleeting breath, Kasataka would pull him down again, relentless, unyielding. Panic threatened to overwhelm him. But Ken knew he had to stay calm. He had to rely on his training, his instincts, his understanding of the animal that held his life in her hands. He couldn't fight her, couldn't struggle, or he risked triggering a more violent reaction. He had to remain passive, to try and communicate with her, to somehow break through the barrier of instinct and remind her of the bond they once shared. Above the surface, chaos reigned. The trainers scrambled to respond, slapping the water, whistling, throwing nets, anything to distract Kasaka and break her hold. But nothing worked. She was locked in, driven by a force that defied all attempts at intervention. The audience watched in horror, their faces a mixture of fear and disbelief. Children cried, parents shielded their eyes, and a collective gasp filled the stadium with each plunge below the waves. What they were witnessing was not entertainment, not a show, but a life or death struggle between man and animal. Time seemed to stretch on forever as Ken was repeatedly dragged under, his lungs burning, his body battered and bruised. He fought to stay conscious, to conserve oxygen, to maintain a semblance of control. He knew that his survival depended on his ability to endure, to outlast the powerful predator that held him captive. Then, after what seemed like an eternity, Kasaka finally released him. Slowly, cautiously, Ken began to swim towards the platform, his body trembling with exhaustion, his foot throbbing with pain. The trainers reached out, pulling him from the water, his shredded wetsuit stained with blood. He collapsed onto the concrete, gasping for air, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief. He had survived, but the experience had changed him, shattering his trust, shaking his faith in the illusion of control. He had looked into the eyes of a killer whale and seen not a partner, not a friend, but a predator, a force of nature that could never be fully tamed. The attack on Ken Peters was a wake-up call, a stark reminder of the inherent risks of keeping these magnificent creatures in captivity. It was a tragedy that would spark outrage, fuel debate, and ultimately lead to significant changes in the way marine parks operated. The attack on Ken Peters wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a reckoning that forced SeaWorld and the entire marine park industry to confront some uncomfortable truths about the ethics of keeping apex predators in captivity. The immediate aftermath was a flurry of internal investigations, damage control, PR, and a very real sense of fear among the training staff. Imagine being in their shoes. You dedicate your life to these animals, building bonds based on trust and mutual respect, only to witness that trust shatter in such a violent and public way. The question on everyone's mind, could it happen again? And who would be next? But the behind-the-scenes turmoil was nothing compared to the legal storm that was brewing. Following the incident, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, better known as OSHA, launched a full-scale investigation into SeaWorld's safety protocols and training procedures. This wasn't just about one rogue orca or one isolated incident. OSHA was digging deep, examining years of internal records, interviewing trainers past and present, and scrutinizing every aspect of SeaWorld's operations. What they found was troubling, to say the least. The investigation uncovered a pattern of near misses, warning signs ignored, and a culture that prioritized entertainment over safety. Testimony revealed that trainers had expressed concerns about Kasatka's unpredictable behavior for years, particularly when she was separated from her calves. There were documented instances of aggression, refusals to follow commands, and a general sense of unease around the massive Orca. SeaWorld, of course, maintained that they had always prioritized safety, and that the attack on Ken Peters was an isolated incident, an anomaly in an otherwise successful program. But the evidence presented by OSHA painted a very different picture. Internal memos, incident reports, and expert testimony all pointed to a systemic failure to adequately protect trainers from the inherent risks of working with killer whales. The stakes were incredibly high. OSHA argued that SeaWorld had willfully violated workplace safety laws by exposing trainers to a known hazard. They proposed a series of sweeping changes to SeaWorld's operations, including a ban on water work between trainers and orcas without physical barriers. SeaWorld fought back, arguing that the proposed restrictions would cripple their orca program and undermine the educational value of their shows. They claimed that trainers were highly trained professionals who understood the risks involved and that the existing safety protocols were sufficient. The ensuing legal battle was long, complex, and highly publicized. Courtrooms became battlegrounds, with lawyers on both sides presenting expert witnesses, poring over internal documents, and debating the finer points of marine mammal behavior. The videos of the attack on Ken Peters became central to the case, replayed again and again, framed by agonizing frame. It was hard to watch, even for those who weren't directly involved. Finally, in 2012, OSHA issued its ruling. They upheld their original citations, finding that SeaWorld had indeed exposed trainers to a recognized hazard. The ruling imposed strict limitations on water work with orcas, requiring physical barriers between trainers and animals. During performances, the impact of OSHA's ruling was immediate and far-reaching. SeaWorld was forced to revamp its orca shows, eliminating many of the close contact interactions that had been a hallmark of its performances for decades. The trainers, many of whom had dedicated their lives to working with these animals, were devastated. For them, the water work wasn't just a job. It was a passion, a calling. Now, they were being told they couldn't do it anymore. But the OSHA ruling was just the beginning. The attack on Ken Peters, coupled with the subsequent investigation and legal battle, had ignited a firestorm of public criticism. Animal rights activists, who had long protested the captivity of killer whales, seized on the incident as further evidence of the inherent cruelty of marine parks. Documentaries like Blackfish, released in 2013, amplified these concerns, reaching a massive audience and turning public opinion firmly against SeaWorld. Blackfish focused not only on the dangers faced by trainers, but also on the psychological and emotional toll of captivity on the orcas themselves. The film argued that killer whales, highly intelligent and social animals, suffer immensely in the confined spaces of marine parks. It highlighted the fact that orcas in captivity often display abnormal behaviors, such as aggression, depression, and self-harm. The release of Blackfish triggered a public relations nightmare for SeaWorld. Attendance plummeted, sponsors pulled out, and the company's stock price took a nosedive. SeaWorld found itself on the defensive, struggling to counter the film's narrative and defend its business practices. Under immense pressure, SeaWorld eventually made a series of major concessions. In 2016, the company announced that it would end its captive orca breeding program, effectively ending the era of killer whale shows. They also pledged to phase out theatrical orca performances and replace them with more naturalistic exhibits that emphasized education and conservation. These changes were hailed by animal rights activists as a major victory, but for many, they came too late. The damage to SeaWorld's reputation was already done, and the company continues to face scrutiny and criticism from animal welfare groups. The attack on Ken Peters, And the events that followed raised some fundamental questions about our relationship with animals. Do we have the right to confine wild creatures for our entertainment? What are the ethical implications of keeping highly intelligent and social animals in captivity? And what is our responsibility to ensure their well-being? These questions continue to be debated today, and they have sparked a broader conversation about the future of marine parks and the ethics of animal captivity. Even now, years later, some lingering questions remain about that fateful day in November 2006. Was Kasatka simply acting on instinct, protecting her calf from a perceived threat? Or was there something more going on? Some deeper level of frustration or aggression that had been building up over years of confinement? We may never know for sure, but one thing is certain. The attack on Ken Peters changed everything. It exposed the hidden dangers of working with killer whales, sparked a public outcry against animal captivity, and forced SeaWorld to confront the ethical implications of its business model. It was a tragedy that served as a wake-up call, a reminder that even the most carefully managed relationships with wild animals can be unpredictable and potentially deadly. And it left a legacy of lingering questions about our responsibility to the creatures we hold captive. The attack on Ken Peters was a wake-up call, a stark reminder of the inherent risks of keeping these magnificent creatures in captivity. Was a tragedy that would spark outrage, fuel debate, and ultimately lead to significant changes in the way marine parks operated.